Welcome to Inner Peace with Dr. Reese, a program that can help you become liberated in the modern world. Now, here's your host, Dr. Kevin W. Reese.
Can you imagine getting up every day and going to a job or a business that you don't like and you're uncontent with? Welcome to episode number 79. Today, I'm talking to Lori Theriault. She's a career counselor and CEO of Work It Careers. She helps people, even children as young as 10 years old, find the right career that they are going to be content with. She dives deep with her clients, figuring out their personality, their interests, and even how long downtime they need so they can recharge and relax. In this conversation, we're going to find out how she works with the people, mostly kids, on finding that career alignment. We're going to find out what the difference is between an entrepreneur and a solopreneur. And why do so many people try to start a business but end up shutting it down? We'll even dive into my career choices and see what we come up with. So sit down, relax, and take in this recording. Lori, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, how important is it that someone has either a job, career, or business that really resonates with them, that really agrees with them, that they really love in order to have inner peace in their life?
That's such a great question. I spent many, many years watching people arrive into jobs that they thought were professions, their ideal professions, when in reality, they never liked it to begin with. They just kept growing their resume, job after job, with the same discomfort that they felt, when they were out of college or out of high school.
This can really bring a lot of stress to someone's life, right?
Yeah, and how people deal with that stress is a lot based on your personality. And once you understand who you are and what strengths you are naturally born with, and grow those strengths, you tend not to attract that stress that 80% of the world has today, because they're just not aligned properly. They're brainwashed, as many of us have been in our lives, where people want to change us to be more like them. A lot of bosses out there trying to change their employees to work on those weaknesses. Well, what are weaknesses? Just because I'm not like you doesn't mean I'm weak.
Right.
So I think, trying to squash that old mentality that people need to swing the pendulum completely in the other direction to be more respected in the workplace and life. That's caused a lot of illness. I've seen it. Yeah. If you're in a job where you're not using your natural gifts, and after 5, 10, 15 years, I kind of compare it to an elastic band. Eventually that elastic band stretches so much it breaks.
And so you're helping people, you're going in depth to their personality, and you're saying this is the path that you should take, because we have to make money. Unless we go to a monastery or an ashram and we say, I'm walking that path, society is set up in a way that we have to make money to pay bills. So we got to go bring home the money. So
yeah. So I don't tell people what to become. What I do is I work with them, first of all, from a personality standpoint. So I really spend the first hour of my 2-hour session really deep diving on the natural gifts that God gave them,
Mm.
and really talking about how we're going to incorporate those natural gifts in a career path. So whether I'm working with a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 25-year-old, a 45-year-old, or a 70-year-old, and those are the ages, I work with them all. I take those natural gifts and start a 7-step plan where step number 1 is where you are today. I am a futurist. I am someone who talks very little about past. I take people to their future. So when you come to see me, it's to talk about it's to talk and plan about your future,
Mm.
because you can't change anything from the past. It's
Mm.
impossible. So why waste our energy? So I just need a little bit of information from your past to be able to get that step 1 aligned properly. So that's how I operate. I'm able to not let them go down the rabbit hole of the past, to where I have to pull them out. And I talk about how bright that future is going to be. And I can see it. It's just many people can't. And to go back to me saying that I don't tell you what to become when you grow up, I pull that out of you.
Mm.
So it starts with the personality strengths. And then from there, I ask open-ended questions that leads to a clue of what you want to further your education on and what you want to actually apply for as your next stepping stone in career.
And this would be best for someone to do younger, right? An 11-year-old versus, say, a 17-year-old senior in high school. Because when the guidance counselor calls first of all, I don't know if anyone's more stressed out in the world than an American teenager in high school. That's a tough gig.
You're right.
So I mean, a pimple can ruin their life, right?
Yes.
So when that guidance counselor calls you in at like 15, 16 years old and says, all right, what do you want to do with your life? That's a lot of pressure. But if they were working with you, they might get it right away.
Yeah, you're bringing up an interesting point. Guidance counselors today, and I think unfortunately they get picked on, mainly because they don't have enough hours in the day to be able to help students that are not college bound find their way. Based on my experiences, in the last 5 years of doing this full time and working with students, high school students, a lot of them, the feedback that I get from the support from a high school is more about asking them what college they would like to go to. They don't really do a deep dive as to what their passions are.
Mm-hmm.
I had a student a couple years ago, and she really, really wanted to go to a certain university. And when she created her 7-step plan with me, it was maybe a week before school was going to start her senior year. So excited. And she goes to the guidance counselor to ask for an application for that university. And the guidance counselor immediately touched her arm and said, "Oh, sweetie, there's no way you're going to get into that university." Now, this girl was 3rd in her class. Why would a guidance counselor say such a thing?
Mm.
So fast forward a couple more months after that, she ended up getting a massive scholarship, and she went to the university of her choice. But it was amazing how a professional's opinion, because it was just an opinion, there was no fact to it, could have burst the bubble of another student. Now, this student was very strong, very confident, because the only thing I sell, Kevin, is confidence. So once you have your 7 steps, you're confident where you're going. So this girl had her confidence. She came home, mentioned it to her mother, and at that point, really got the reinforced support to be able to continue her her journey. It's important to understand that no one is in control of your life but you, and that inner peace that you have, knowing that the journey ahead is totally aligned to who you are. That's something that brings a lot of peace and lifetime contentment. It's really about attracting what it is that benefits you. And there's no talk of weaknesses, because in my world, there's no such thing. You're born with certain strengths that are going to contribute to the world in some fashion. And the other people that are born with different strengths are going to contribute in a different way, in their own way. So, I have 2,000 students so far, not a single repeat career path, not a single repeat. I mean, people are saying, jobs are going away, certain jobs, because of technology. I'll tell you, I have uncovered so many different job paths that I would never have known about. These people are educating me because they see a problem in the world that they want to be part of the solution. And they, zone into a particular niche. I had one student, environmental engineering. Well, environmental engineering is so broad. What part of the environment are you most attracted to? So, some will say soil, some will say air. And then one person is saying sustainability. So, I mean, it's one person wants law as far as environment. The other one wants hands-on. There's so many jobs within sectors that can be introduced to kids. And 90% of the time, these kids have already done their research before they come see me. They just have tucked it away years ago. If a 10-year-old is coming to me, it's obviously something that's a recent study. But if a 16-year-old is to come to me, and like you just mentioned, they're the group that totally needs this. They need some sort of direction right now. It's crazy. You get the extroverted kids that are homeschooled or virtual learning. It's painful. It's very painful for them. So to be able to have light at the end of the tunnel, and knowing what's beyond high school is so, it allows them to exhale.
Using myself as an example, going back 25, 26 years, I pretty much knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be in broadcasting from a young age. I was always on a darn microphone and doing all sorts of things with my friends. And so I didn't know what part of broadcasting. I didn't know if I wanted to be a sports announcer or a DJ. I didn't know that, but I knew what field. So I ended up at the Connecticut School of Broadcasting at 16 years old, the summer before my senior year of high school. And that changed the direction of my life. So I guess that was you, so to speak, something coming in and molding a young man's direction. So by the time I got to my guidance counselor's office, I'm like, wow, so I'm gonna be on radio and TV. What do you mean? This is what I'm doing. And they're like, all right, hold on a second. You should go to college just in case. That's a crazy field. And he was right. So I ended up in college, got on the college radio station immediately. They put me on the radio immediately because I had the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, right? And then I spent 4 years doing a radio and TV show and, cutting my teeth, so to speak. And then when I got out, 21 years old, I was hired at Hot 93.7 WZMX. And boom, local public figure, just like that, 21 years old. Making no money.
Loving what you're doing, though.
Loving the attention.
Yeah.
So you talk about that, how you find the person's personality, you find the young man or woman's personality, and then adjust to that. So I take what you're saying and I look back and I say, yeah, my personality was someone that wanted the microphone, wanted the attention, you know?
Even before 16.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even before 16.
And I
So,
made it happen.
yeah. So let's say that you came to me at age 10 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
I would have said, I would have introduced Kevin to himself, because that's what I do is I actually become their mirror, and I actually become them. So after a 15-minute personality test that I've used over 30 years to build strong teams in manufacturing where I come from, I've taken this test and I'm able to quickly get a plotting of the person. And from there, without any studying, I'm able to become Kevin. So I would introduce Kevin in a similar fashion. So not having given you the test, I would say, Kevin, the 11-year-old Kevin, I would say, Kevin, I want to introduce you to you. You are a man who is destined to use his voice as a tool to educate your audience. That's how I would introduce you at 11 years old. Now, what does that mean to an 11-year-old? So we would break it down into more of an 11-year-old definition, and that would be, Kevin, your voice is your gift. Whether you advocate for things that are important to you, you use your voice for those that don't have one, you will do great things with your voice. Now, the other part of the test is, how much education and what form of education does this 11-year-old Kevin require?
Right.
Now, we know that you've gone as far as PhD. We know that. Now,
that was way later, though.
That was way later, but at 11 years old, I would have been able to tell on the testing whether or not you craved that fact-based learning style and craved the university type learning programs. So the scoring that I use it starts at 0 and it goes to 48. 48 is the highest. 48's on the last number is typically people that want lifelong learning. So you love continuing that learning of the subject that you're born to study forever. So I would be able to tell a parent, Kevin's parents, that, hey, you better be prepared because this child craves education and it's traditional education that he craves. So his learning style is more fact-based, which tends to be the traditional university setting. Then there's people that score only about 30 to 35, 36. Those are the kids that want to create something with their hands. They want to be able to DIY, they don't need to hire somebody for that. They can do it themselves. Definitely maybe an 18-month certification program to become licensed and all that stuff. So I would be able to tell at 11 years old what zone of education. Now there's my type of personality, which is not PhD, and it's experiential. So I'm a visionary, and I was born to actually create something that's never been created before in the world. And being that pioneer is something that only about 10% of the world actually scores this way. Where sitting in a classroom, the only reason, Kevin, that I actually was okay going to school in a traditional setting was because it gave me a stage. I liked being with people. So that's the only way. But now if I was a quiet, introverted visionary, I would have probably dropped out of school because it wasn't my best way of learning. I could do it, but I was forcing myself. I was stretching. My best way of learning is actually through field trips, through watching others, through making the error, never doing it again. And with 30 years of me doing that in my lifetime, it affords me to be an expert in certain areas because I've lived the experience. Whereas other people are more about, you are classified as an expert if you got your PhD because you studied by book. You may have less real life experience, but the combination of the two are, that's the best. But it's just three different types of learning styles, and some are on the edge where they can combine. That doesn't mean like a personality like mine wouldn't sign up for university life and do okay. I'd probably do okay as long as it wasn't virtual learning, because virtual learning I think would kill me.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I ended up switching careers at 33 years old,
Uh-huh.
and then going to get the PhD and all that.
Yeah.
So I could have used you at like 32.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of college students right now that I'm working with that already received their 4-year degree, and they're not able to really solidify the path that they wanted or want, but they got the degree and they just are stumped. So, in 2 hours, it's all it takes for me to work with somebody and get them a 7-step plan. No session has lasted more than 2 hours and 10 minutes. And that would be like the hardest one, no matter what age.
Let's talk about the other side of that coin.
Yeah.
Running your own business, being an entrepreneur. This is another ball game. And I've been an entrepreneur basically for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. It takes a different type of cat to do it. I like to tell, I don't mean to like, crap on people's dreams, but I tell people like, not everyone can run a business. Like it takes a certain obsessive type of detail orientation to do it. And so I was wondering, how do you test the ability of someone to run a business?
I think that's my favorite topic. I'm an entrepreneur through and through. At 10 years old, I begged my parents for $25 so that I could have my own 60 customer paper route. It was going to be the biggest thing of my life. And in fact, looking back, it was like the best job ever. Being able to service people, being able to look forward to something after school, and make money at the same time. So, testing the entrepreneurs is very easy for me. About 10% of my students, and I've had over 2,000 so far, have tested as entrepreneurial. Now, not to be confused with solopreneur, because they're two different animals, Kevin. They're solopreneurs are more individuals that hire subcontractors versus employees. They tend to control everything about their business from start to finish because they don't trust as easily as an entrepreneur. So a solopreneur is in it to make a lot of money, not necessarily to pass it on to their family. It's more about making the business at a certain level and then being able to sell it and say that they ran that for their profession. But an entrepreneur has a mindset which is about family. It's about bringing and mentoring and training and promoting and making sure that that business withstands the test of time.
Like a family pizza shop or something like that gets passed down to the kids.
Yes, that's more entrepreneurial because they have the patience to train the kids. I'm thinking, larger companies where you have to hire 25 people. And, in today's world, you talked about the stress. I mean, when you've got a solopreneur mindset and you're in an entrepreneurial setting, that solopreneur, you need to worry about that person's mental health because they lose their patience a lot. They're the ones complaining that they can't find any good hires. All kids are lazy. They're the ones complaining all the time. That's a solopreneur. An entrepreneur will always find an array of hope, and they will never put down their employees. So that's your cue as to the stress level. True entrepreneurs don't get stressed by people because they love people. They have hope for humanity.
Yeah, it sounds like the entrepreneur from your explanation is a little bit more um, trusting,
Yes, absolutely.
and the solopreneur is not so much.
Right. They will usually only have one or two main employees that they have tested very well. Subcontractors are much they're much easier for them to manage because they can fire them. They don't have to go through all the loopholes as having your own employee, because there's a lot of laws that they have to follow, and solopreneurs tend not to want all that red tape. They just want to run their business and make money, go home. Whereas entrepreneurs extend it into longer days, longer hours, because they're very humanitarian entrepreneurs. They're volunteer. They might have fundraisers with their employees. They really give to the community. And the society that we live in today doesn't really separate the solopreneurs from the entrepreneurs. It lumps them all together.
Mm.
And that's something that I'm trying to educate these students that come to me, to make sure that they understand what solopreneur means as they score in that area.
Now, I've heard you say that about 80% of business owners end up closing shop before their first year is even done.
They do.
I mean, this is an overwhelming thing. It's so different than going to work for someone and collecting a check.
Hmm.
Why are so many people trying to be business owners and then shutting down?
A lot of people they tend to glamorize when they're working for somebody else. They can be very critical of the management style of their current employer, and they feel that they could do better on their own because look how much money this guy's pulling in. He's only giving me this much per hour. He's making lots of money. They're usually not seeing all the stuff behind the scenes, after hours, the stress of being
Mm,
your own business owner, right?
yeah.
And they're not seeing that part. They're just seeing the car that the person's driving.
This is Michael Jordan syndrome.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it looks easy. I can ball like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's actually healthy for them to go take a dip into that world and get a better respect for a business owner. Um, it's 80%, approximately 80% of first year businesses will go under because, first of all, a lot of them are solopreneurs, and they realize that they need people to make their business successful.
Mm,
And at that point, they have zero tolerance for people. There's so many solopreneurs who can't stand, having to babysit. They call it babysitting, babysit their employees. So if that's another sign that you're dealing with a solopreneur versus an entrepreneur, if they constantly are complaining about babysitting,
mm.
or my employees act like 5-year-olds, that's another sign.
Wow. I never broke the two down, so
Yeah,
um,
it's important that, because when a lot of colleges offer entrepreneurial training, right? We've seen those classes.
mm,
It's You're stretching the solopreneurs. You're stretching the solopreneurs in that class because a lot of it is how to manage people, and that's not something that they are naturally good at. They're not motivators. They want to get the job done so they can get paid. That's really what their purpose is.
would a solopreneur be like somebody that starts their own plumbing company maybe, and
Yeah,
they do all the work themselves for the most part. Maybe they have one secretary and
exactly. Yep, a solopreneur would be that. Accountant would be another solopreneur.
mm,
Another example might be a landlord. Another example would be a laundromat owner, car
mm,
wash owner, where they don't really have to interact with a lot of people.
right.
If it's and if they need a plumber to fix their apartment building, they're calling as a subcontractor. It's not their employee,
Right.
you know.
They mess
So
up, they can yell at them.
exactly, without getting in trouble. Yep. And without losing a good employee, because we know that entrepreneurs need to be very emotionally intelligent in order to keep their staff happy. And typically solopreneurs have a high IQ. They're delivering something, consulting services, something of expertise. So therefore, they're not going to be criticized so much because they're the experts. Solopreneurs tend to be the experts in their field, of which, if you don't want my service, that's fine. Somebody else will. Solopreneurs also tend to establish or take over a business that's needed. They don't take the risk of creating something that has never been heard of before. So, my company is a company that is going to help your 10-year-old figure out what they're going to be when they grow up. Well, that's, let me tell you something, Kevin. 5 years ago, people looked at me like I had 5 heads, and they said, you don't need to be talking to my kid about jobs and work at 10 years old. They want to be playing soccer. So that was, 5 years ago, that was the response that I was getting. So, working with seniors in high school was more popular, or college students that were lost, and then gravitating back down to middle school now. 5 years later, people get it, but I had to wait patiently until the world woke up.
Right. What about someone that builds out and has multiple streams of income?
Mm-hmm.
Someone that has 3, 4, 5 businesses.
Yeah. Well, a traditional entrepreneur could have up to 9 funnels of income. And that's always a good thing, not to have all your eggs in one basket, right? But you have to have going back to your original question of how does one identify an entrepreneur, and how do you keep yourself balanced to be able to go past that first year, go past that second year, because it doesn't get any easier past the first year. You got to step up your game. And it's managing multiple businesses as a solopreneur is a common thing. So they may own multiple apartment units. They may own multiple, businesses that don't require a lot of employees. And that's okay for solopreneurs, because again, they're in it for the money. Entrepreneurs are in it for the money, but they're also in it for helping humans succeed. That's almost like getting paid $1 million to an entrepreneur, that you've helped an employee move forward in their life, taking somebody off the streets. It's amazing, that feeling of, it's not money driven, it's more emotion driven. And if you're emotionally driven, you're going to maybe not have as much money to be able to invest into that next, second or third funnel of income, at least in the beginning, because you're doing more of a humanitarian, not volunteering, but you're definitely more generous than a solopreneur financially.
Here's a big term: time freedom. Mm-hmm. How about choosing a career or business that creates some time freedom? Is that something that, to me, that's something in my older age, now that I'm entering, now that I'm in my 40s, that's something that's very appealing to me. Maybe not 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was like, go, 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 achieve, 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 achieve. And now it's like, I just want to sit in my chair and look at the wall. So, how can I do that and still make money?
So in the testing that I use, I actually can see the percentage of you time that you need. So for me, I score to where I need 90% of my day needs to be filled with people energy and communication verbally, and stage time. If I don't get that, I'm actually drained. I'm drained. So that's that student that's studying from home, they're drained. For you, you may need less people time than I do, face to face, and you may want, let's say 30% of your day or a week to be planned for downtime, vacations, not really talking about your product or your service. For me, I only need about 10% of that downtime. So I'm almost like constantly talking about what I offer as a service. So I can tell from the testing how much downtime. So for you to say that, you just require a little less people energy than I would do. And we make that as part of your 7-step plan to actually put that and incorporate that. What does that downtime look like, Kevin? I would actually pull that out of your brain and start to talk about how do you recharge? Because all you're saying to me right now is that you are in need of a periodic recharge. And if you can incorporate that recharge daily, what would that look like? Is it pet energy? Is it nature? Is it the ocean? What does that look like to recharge Kevin so that he's raring to go the next day?
Just a chair.
Just a chair?
Just a chair.
A recliner?
No. Nope. Back straight. Just a regular chair. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Meditation. Yeah.
That's awesome. So we would incorporate that in your 7 steps. So, because the 7 steps are meant to repeat as necessary. It's not meant to actually go in order. It's actually meant to just make sure that we record the things that are important to you to get to your legacy.
Legacy. It's a big word.
It's a big word.
What do you mean by legacy and getting to the legacy?
Yeah. So we, as I mentioned earlier, that first step is key. Once we can get you rolling on creating that first step, the rest of it goes pretty quickly. But step number 7 is your legacy. I want to be remembered for. That is what I make them write on the board. And it starts off with, I want to be remembered for. Then I have them sit across from me. And we talk about what we wrote through 1 through 6. And sometimes the legacy spins off of that. And then sometimes it doesn't. And it's amazing because they go deep into their heart. And they just sit there straight back, right, in the chair. And now all of a sudden it's, what do I want to be remembered for? And I want them to live their legacy, within a year or 2 of them leaving my office. I don't want them to wait till age 70 to live a legacy. I want you to live your legacy as soon as possible. So what does that legacy look like? It's for example, one woman who raised her children. Now she's, ready to get back out there into the work world. What does that dream job look like? For her, it's a fitness coach, but her legacy goes deep. Her legacy is to create movement in children that is going to prevent childhood diabetes. So that's her legacy. It goes deep with a purpose. It's not just, walking every day. There's a prevention piece to it. And she'll spend the rest of her life really promoting and teaching to young students so that they're not, that they're not hurting their health at a young age.
Let's talk about ego. That's something that comes up a lot on this podcast, something we explore a lot. The ego does develop in young people. My observation is around 13. It really formulates. I mean, it starts 7, it starts at 2 years old. I mean, terrible 2s. But it starts to really formulate around 12, 13 years old. And so using myself as an example again, I was playing around with microphones and all that. So I knew that I wanted to, be a broadcaster or a on-air personality. You said just however many minutes ago that my purpose would have been to use my voice to educate and help people. But I didn't do that. I ended up on an FM radio station acting like an idiot for 16 years. Doing, crazy bits and making fun of people. And it took a lot of time for my evolution to come back around to 40-year-old Kevin talking about inner peace and ego and having a PhD and that type of stuff. It took a long time because even our mutual friend Karen Raymond pointed that out to me on this podcast. She's like, "You're on a microphone right now." I'm like, "Oh, you're right, I am."
Yeah.
And so she's like, "That's the same microphone you were on 25 years ago, except you're doing it differently."
Yes.
So that's where we're talking ego kind of here, because my ego at a young age was to be a performer.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's to be an educator or a relaxing medium for people. So
Sure.
there's ego involved with these kids, right? So how do you harness that?
From a kid standpoint, so let's take I just want to provide a little piece of education the way it was explained to me one time. So a baby's brain is fully formed to size at 9 months old. After 9 months, so between 9 months and 5 years old, imagine all these wires being connected and intertwined, because they're taking it all in. They're learning the vocabulary, they're learning and touching things, math. They're actually going and touching nature. They're really taking it all in. So what happens at 5 years old? Well, they enter kindergarten, and at kindergarten they start to disconnect some of those wires naturally, the stuff that they don't want to continue learning. It's not their purpose. So here's all these wires slowly being disconnected between ages 5 and 9. Well, now we're talking ego, right? It's not really ego. It's this, they've identified their strengths at that point, because what's left connected at age 9 is really where they want to grow. So they start to fight back. They start to fight back with their authority, with their parents, with their grandparents, and they're saying that they have no interest in that. And that, again, that's the wires that have been disconnected. So scientifically, it's proven between the ages of 9 and 12, what you're destined to do in life is there. It's just, you got to capture it. Now, trauma can happen with young children. Trauma can happen with teenage. Trauma can interrupt that wire transmission. So what I do is I work with them to kind of chisel and reconnect to that inner child, to be able to, uncover, rediscover what their passion was at age 9. So I do take them, remember I said I don't really go in the past, but I do take them to about age 9, 10, 11, just so I can kind of see what they were doing, what they were gravitating towards. You would have said, I like touching a microphone. You know what I mean? So it's that. So the ego part, in the testing that I do, the ego lives in your strengths. So if you're somebody who loves the stage and loves to use your voice, I can see that if somebody puts you in a corner because, let's say, one of your parents was more stage worthy than you, or because they were older, they took it and they stole your stage, you would start to rebel eventually. So that's where people's complain about their teenager, because at that point they're trying to show where their strengths are, but sometimes it's shown as disrespect. And it's not to be confused. So a lot of times, Kevin, parents will sit in on the session with their child with me. So they actually learn about their child in that 2 hours, and they learn more about them, and they're able to support them better. So it's definitely a beautiful experience if the parent sits in and watches it unfold. But at a 13-year-old level, they're just really trying to use the gifts that God gave them. And that could be being introverted, extroverted, a director or a soldier, or a future PhD, a planner versus somebody who responds urgently to cleaning their room. We talk about who needs lists, who needs deadlines, who doesn't need deadlines, who needs the stage, who doesn't need the stage, who is confused. A lot of parents will say, is my child depressed? I can tell from the score if they're depressed or not. They're definitely, there's introverted children that want to be in their room to recharge after a day of being in school with a lot of students. They need that downtime at the end of the day. I recommend pets for certain kids because that actually recharges them.
By the way, just you made me think of something. My mom told me that I was like that as a kid. I would come
Well,
home from school and I had to go to my room or watch cartoons.
yeah.
I couldn't do anything.
I think, if I was to give you the percentage, I think you are a 70-30 individual, which meant that in school you were probably the class clown. So 70% of your day was already consumed in the school setting, to where you were, being that witty person and making people laugh.
I was born July 30th, by the way. You just said
Oh,
7:30.
see? So I think you already consumed your gas in your gas tank by the time you got home from school, so that you
Right.
needed to recharge. So give you a few hours, and then you'll be able to answer questions about how was your day, son.
Right.
Needed that recharge moment, and watching the cartoons and the voices, right? The voices of animation. I
The
think,
Smurfs,
yeah,
He-Man.
it actually it
Yes.
refilled you. That's what recharges you. Is the voice. It's the voice. It's not so much singing and dancing on stage. It was more about the voice and being able to be inspired by the different tones.
I'm still like that. I like to decompress. And,
Mm-hmm. 70-30.
July 30th.
That's how I see you. I totally see you that way, where you've got a point depending on where you use your voice in the beginning of your day or the end of the day. But in school, it was definitely you were using it throughout the day, and that's why you needed a little downtime at the end.
Cool. I'm learning about myself, my old self here while we're chatting.
Yeah.
Still talking about the ego. Do you ever talk about, people catching their ego before it impacts others? Because you did mention like
Mm-hmm.
temper tantrums or,
Yeah.
depression and things like this. A lot of that does come from ego.
Absolutely. You're within your strengths lies your ego. And what I do is I give examples of when that ego could be triggered. If you're somebody who is a natural born director, and director is like the extreme, that 48, I call it the highest score. Those are people that are not going to take, they're not going to take demands from authority. And when you're 10 years old,
They're alphas.
Yeah, and when you're 10 years old and your parents are also alphas, it can be a power struggle within the home, right? So when you have a child that doesn't need any more guidance beyond the age of 9 or 10, you definitely are in for a ride through middle school and high school with that child. So that's an ego point. So I talk about that, as a 10 or 11-year-old, and then the parent in the room with me. So I actually give examples of how the 10 or 11-year-old can handle being directed by an adult, a teacher, what have you. So I actually give advice to parents to allow that child to have a project periodically that they're in charge of. That's important for them, to be in charge of something. Allow them to be in charge of something, to direct people, to direct a project, household, whatever it is. Be in charge of paying the bills once a month. It's something to be.
I used to organize the pantry. The junk drawer used to drive me nuts. And my parents weren't super organized, but I was, and
Yep.
I don't know why, but
Yeah, so being able to do projects that come naturally for you, to use your natural skills to it, is amazing. And then for people that need to use their voice and with people, so I'm naturally a salesperson, so being able to go and talk and motivate and sell somebody on an idea, I don't usually give up that easily on the face to face. So let's see where else the ego might live. Um, Another area of ego for parent, especially, wanting your child to clean their room now, do it now. I told you yesterday, I told you 10 times today. Why is it not done? So we talk about how urgent the child is, and we talk about what will motivate them to get it done and not disappoint. So it could be as simple as making a list with check boxes and allowing them to put the check mark in the check boxes. It's simple stuff like that. Then there's some children that are more urgent than the parents. I mean, it's a recipe that's always changing with different families. You get some kids that are more mature than the parents, more driven than the parents. I get a bunch of those. And then you've got some fathers that want to control their kids and they don't want them to grow at all. And my kid doesn't need this, and I'm going to tell them where they're going to school. And that's something that I act as a mediator on that situation, and I help calm the parents that let their egos dictate the future of their child. So I do, and I've had a lot of success with mediating and being able to be the voice of the child who has been squashed.
I remember the first time I met you. You had just come out of a session with this young man who was like, I'm going to be a weatherman, I believe.
He's still going to be a weatherman. He is a senior in high school today, and the school actually brought in a meteorology program for his senior year. So he is going to be taking it in January.
Wow.
So he's excited. He's excited that the principal went so far to push for such a program to exist in his school.
I could have been a meteorologist because the on-air aspect, being on a microphone, combined with the sort of nerdy, wanting to know the details of the environment and the weather and the ions and the clouds, and that's cool stuff.
Can you get up at 2:00 in the morning? Are you good about
I don't know about that.
Because that's what time they need to get up.
Oh my gosh.
They got to be on air by 4, and they need to create their graphics between 3 and 4, and it's a crazy lifestyle.
They also have to move a lot too, because if there's no openings in Hartford, then they got to go to San Diego or wherever.
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
It's broadcasting.
It is. It really is. Obviously I love what I do. I've taken it to a new level once I left manufacturing, and working for myself, like you mentioned earlier. Working for yourself is great, but you have to have the endurance to be able to survive while people get to know who you are and what you do and build your reputation. And
I compare it to, and it's probably not the best comparison because I don't have any children, but I compare it to having a child. It's that all encompassing.
Right.
Where it's just so many details. And if you have a child, based on what I hear, it's all encompassing, and it's details until they're, off to college. If that's the route they go, it's just constant details.
Yeah. It's definitely, for me, for my business, it's definitely not for everybody because it requires 7 days a week, and it requires, for parents, their downtime to talk to me is before kids get up, or once they left for school, or once they're in bed. So it's a lot of communication before hours, after hours, traditional hours. And then weekends is when they're available, and sports get in the way typically. There's a lot of me accommodating their schedules to get a career plan done for their child, which it's not the number one priority just yet in the mindset, but eventually it will. Again, that's the visionary in me, waiting for the world to catch up, that, setting a career plan, 2 hours of your life. Just want to remind you, it's only 2 hours of your life, and you're done and you're good. But they don't just 100% see it yet.
I think what you're doing is very valuable, because if somebody gets into the wrong career or the wrong job or the wrong business, they're going to be miserable. And that's not the life you want to live. You don't want to get up in the morning and go to a job that just absolutely, you just so hate and dislike.
Yeah.
It's not where you want to be, right?
No. And that 2 hours spent as a middle schooler or high schooler could save people's lives. You're taking people's opportunity for peaceful life away by not investing in a career plan for your child. Make it as important as getting their driver's, training.
License,
The
right?
driver's ed, yeah. The driver's ed seems to be at the tips of parents' tongues, right? Oh, did your child do the driver's ed? And eventually it will be, did they do their career plan before they took their driver's ed? Because you need to really find your purpose before you get behind the wheel. Because if you don't know where you're going, why are you driving around?
Well said.
Mm-hmm.
Lori, where can somebody come find you, see what you're doing, and say hello?
Thank you. Workitcareers.com. That's the website. And I am available nationwide, virtually, as well as in person in Connecticut.
All right, Lori, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
At this time, I'd like to invite you to the exclusive Patreon page. Help support this podcast by becoming a patron, a member. I'll give you all sorts of bonus material. And in return, you help us keep this microphone on. You can simply hit the link in the description of this podcast and explore the meditations, the anxiety relief tea that I have for you, and the Patreon page, and see what moves you, see what resonates with you. We're coming up on episode 80. The next episode is going to be about the 3 types of love. So send this podcast to someone that needs to hear it, and I'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Inner Peace with Dr. Reese. If this episode opened your heart, feel free to share on social media and tell your loved ones. Also, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, may peace be with you.